My name is Emily Carter, and I was 28 years old the night my father told me to get out of his house. It wasn't just a normal fight. It was the breaking point of years of buried tension, dismissive glances, and quiet humiliations. I should have expected it, but somehow the words still sliced through me like glass. It was late November in Chicago, 2 days before Thanksgiving. The air outside was frozen, but inside our family's dining room, the atmosphere burned with something sharper than fire. My mother, Helen, was setting the table, her hands moving with military precision, making sure the napkins were folded just so. My younger brother, Daniel, sat at the far end of the table, scrolling through his phone while his wife, Rachel, whispered about the twins' Christmas outfits. I took my seat quietly, a place that never truly belonged to me anymore. The smell of roasted turkey filled the room, and for a moment, it almost felt like home. Almost. Until my father, Richard Carter, walked in wearing his usual expression, stern, controlled, as if the weight of the entire family's reputation rested squarely on his shoulders. He gave Daniel a warm clap on the back, asked about his new promotion at the hospital, and then turned to me with the same tired disappointment he had carried for years. "So, Emily," he said, voice flat, "still no plans to go back and finish that degree? Or are we just drifting, as usual?" The words weren't new, but the sting never dulled. I forced a smile, hiding the truth I'd been keeping for nearly a decade. He thought I was still the dropout who walked away from Stanford my junior year. To him, I was the wasted potential, the shame of the family, the daughter who sold junk online instead of making something respectable of herself. "I'm doing fine, Dad," I replied softly, my tone neutral. Daniel chuckled without looking up. "Fine? That's not exactly a career update." Rachel laughed politely, covering her mouth with her manicured hand. Even Mom pressed her lips into a thin line, as if she wished I'd just stop existing long enough to make dinner pleasant. I clenched my hands under the table. They didn't know, none of them knew, that I wasn't drifting. That while they dismissed me, I had quietly built an empire, a company worth more than their wildest dreams. But every year, every holiday, I bit my tongue. I told myself family unity mattered more than recognition. I told myself that keeping my secret was safer than inviting their disbelief or ridicule. Dinner moved forward like it always did. Toasts to Daniel's achievements, proud speeches about the Carter family legacy, endless praise for Rachel's parenting. And when silence finally fell, Dad turned his sharp gaze back on me. "Emily," he said, slow and deliberate, "you're nearly 30 years old. What exactly do you have to show for it? Daniel owns a house. Rachel's publishing articles in medical journals. And you," his voice broke into a bitter laugh. "You drive in here in a rented car and wear the same coat you've had since college. It's pathetic." Heat rushed to my face. I swallowed hard, the words forming in my throat but never making it out. If I told him the truth, that I had a company valued at over $4 to $5 million, that I had employees in 3 cities, that the very mortgage payments he bragged about covering had quietly been paid by me, would he believe me? No. He would find another way to belittle it, another way to deny my worth. I stayed silent, but he wasn't done. "You know what?" His fist slammed against the wooden table, rattling the silverware. "I'm tired of this charade. If you refuse to make something of yourself, then don't come here pretending you belong. Get out." The words cracked through the room like thunder. Mom gasped, clutching the edge of the table. Daniel muttered, "Dad," under his breath, but he didn't stop him. Rachel looked away, pretending to soothe one of the twins, though her lips curved into a smirk she didn't bother to hide. I stared at my father, his face red with rage, veins pulsing at his temples. In that moment, I wasn't his daughter anymore. I was the outsider, the embarrassment, the disgrace. The fork in my hand slipped and clattered against the plate. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. My voice came out steady, calm, almost too calm. "All right," I said. "If that's what you want, And then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I left the house where I had grown up, the house where my dreams were dismissed and my worth was reduced to a diploma I never earned. The cold night air hit my face, sharp and merciless, but somehow it felt lighter than the air inside. As I slid behind the wheel of the rental car, my hands trembled. Not from fear, from release. For the first time, I realized I didn't need to keep hiding. They thought they had cast me out in disgrace. But tomorrow, I would show the world, and myself, that I wasn't the failure they believed me to be. That night, as snowflakes began to fall across the Chicago suburbs, I whispered to myself the promise I had been too afraid to make until now. This ends tonight. Tomorrow, I live as who I really am. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt free. The morning after my father told me to leave, the world outside looked calm, but inside me, a storm raged. I woke up in the downtown apartment I kept for business trips, a place no one in my family even knew existed. The curtains were half-drawn, and the gray Chicago light seeped in, illuminating the stacks of contracts and laptops scattered across my desk. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't polished. But it was mine. As I brewed coffee and stayed at the steam rising, I thought about last night. Dad's voice still echoed, "Get out." He probably thought I'd gone back to my pathetic little life, drifting, wasting time, clinging to scraps. He didn't know the truth. None of them did. I opened my laptop, entered my password, and watched as the dashboard of Carter Innovations loaded onto the screen. That was the name of my company. The irony always amused me. The family name they used to remind me of my failures was the same one I had turned into a brand worth millions. The numbers glowed back at me. Valuation, $45,300,000. Employees, 128 across 3 states. Pending deals, 6, worth over $7 million combined. This was my reality, not the failure they saw, not the dropout they pitied. I had built this from nothing. But it hadn't come easy. I remembered those first years after Stanford. I was 21, humiliated, terrified, and broke. I had dropped out not because I couldn't handle the academics, but because I couldn't handle the pressure of being the family's perfect prodigy. The moment I faltered, the moment my grades slipped, Dad's disappointment became unbearable. I chose escape over suffocation. Of course, to him, it was quitting. To me, it was survival. I rented a tiny garage apartment on the south side, worked part-time as a barista, and spent nights teaching myself coding and design. While Daniel bragged about med school dinners and Mom posted family photos online, I sat alone with second-hand textbooks and cheap coffee, building something no one believed in. The company started with nothing but a second-hand laptop and an idea: create software that could help small businesses automate tasks that corporations paid millions to do. I called it PulseTrack. The first year, I made barely enough to cover rent. The second year, I started gaining clients, a bakery, a car repair shop, a local gym. By the third year, I had a small team of freelancers helping me, and by year 5, I had an office, investors, and my first $1 million contract. And through it all, I kept my family in the dark. Why? Because every time I tried to share even the smallest win, the response was the same: dismissive laughter, backhanded compliments, or outright scorn. Cute little project, Dad had once said when I mentioned building an app, but you need to think about a real career. Even Mom had chimed in, maybe you should just get married. Stability is important. So I stopped telling them. I built my empire in silence, letting them believe I was drifting. It was easier that way, less exhausting than fighting for validation that was never going to come. Still, it hurt. Every holiday dinner was a performance where I played the part of the family's black sheep, while secretly carrying more financial power than all of them combined. I bought Daniel's twins' first-year medical bills anonymously. I covered Mom's dental surgery costs through a family friend's donation. I even helped Dad refinance the mortgage when the market crashed, all through shell companies, all invisible. And yet, Last night, he had looked me in the eye and told me I was worthless. I sipped my coffee and laughed bitterly. That laugh quickly turned into something else. Something sharper. A realization. For years, I had lived in the shadows, feeding their needs in silence, letting them believe their version of the story. But what had it gotten me? A seat at a table where I was unwelcome. A label of failure stamped across my identity. Why was I hiding? Why was I letting their perception dictate my silence? I closed the laptop and stood in front of the window, staring at the Chicago skyline. This city had seen me at my lowest. It had witnessed my hunger, my loneliness, my endless nights of failure and trial. But it had also seen me rise. And now, it was time my family, no, the whole world, saw me for who I truly was. The truth was, I wasn't scared of them finding out anymore. I was scared of what would happen when I stopped caring about their approval. Because once I let go of that need, there would be no going back. I walked into my closet, pulled out the suitcase I usually saved for business trips, and started packing. Not just clothes, but statements. Designer suits I never wore around them, heels that clicked like confidence, jewelry that sparkled under boardroom lights. These weren't costumes. They were armor. By the time the suitcase was zipped, my decision was made. I wasn't going to grovel for space at their table anymore. I was going to claim my own. Tomorrow, I would be on a flight to Florida, to the villa I had purchased 6 months ago, a sprawling glass and marble estate on the waterfront of Palm Beach. Worth $4 to $5 million. Paid in full. No more hiding. No more silence. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I reached my assistant, Claire. Book the jet for tomorrow morning, I said. To Miami, she asked. No, I corrected, a smile tugging at my lips. Straight to Palm Beach. It's time to move in. As I ended the call, a strange calm settled over me. The life they thought I didn't have, the career they thought I failed at, the future they thought I'd wasted, it was all waiting for me in Florida, and soon they would see. The jet landed in Palm Beach just as the Florida sun dipped low across the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of orange and violet. The salty breeze carried through the cabin the moment the doors opened, and as I stepped out, a strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't even pride. It was something heavier, a mixture of relief, defiance, and grief for everything I had left behind. A black SUV was waiting on the tarmac, its tinted windows shielding me from curious eyes. My assistant, Claire, greeted me with her usual efficiency. Welcome home, she said, handing me a bottle of water. Home. For the past decade, home had been a word that cut like glass. The Carter house in Chicago had long stopped feeling like it. My showbox apartments and rented spaces were never more than temporary shelters. But now, for the first time in years, I had something permanent. Something mine. The SUV wound its way through palm-lined streets until we reached the iron gates of my villa. They swung open silently, revealing a stretch of perfectly manicured lawn, swaying palms, and a driveway lit with golden path lights. At the end stood the house. No, the statement. $4 to $5 million of glass, steel, and marble rising like a fortress against the ocean. Floor-to-ceiling windows glowed with soft amber light, reflecting the waves crashing just beyond the private beach. Balconies curved like open arms, and the infinity pool shimmered as if the stars themselves had spilled into it. I stepped out of the car slowly, my heels clicking against the polished stone. Claire carried my bag behind me, but I barely noticed. My eyes were locked on the villa. For years, I had imagined this moment. What it would feel like to walk into a space built from my own grit, my own sacrifices, a place untouched by my father's scorn or my brother's arrogance. And yet, standing there, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt haunted, because in the silence between the ocean waves, I heard echoes. My father's voice calling me a failure. My mother's sigh of disappointment. Daniel's mocking laugh. They didn't know this place existed, but their ghosts were already here. Claire unlocked the front door and handed me the keys. You should do the honors, she said softly. I hesitated, staring at the sleek silver key in my palm. Then, with a deep breath, I slid it into the lock. The door opened without resistance, swinging into a cavernous living room bathed in golden light. The first thing that hit me was the space. High ceilings arched overhead, with chandeliers dripping crystal light. The walls were adorned with abstract art I had collected from young, unknown artists, people who reminded me of myself when I started. The furniture was modern but warm, inviting in a way that didn't scream wealth, but whispered it with quiet authority. And the view. God, the view. Floor-to-ceiling glass looked straight out onto the ocean. The horizon stretched endlessly, reminding me that, for the first time, my future wasn't boxed in by anyone else's expectations. Claire placed my bag by the staircase. I'll have the staff bring the rest of your things tomorrow. Thank you, I said, though my voice barely carried. When she left, silence settled over the villa. Not the suffocating silence of my childhood home, filled with judgment and unspoken resentment. This silence was different. It was alive, humming with possibility. I wandered through the rooms, the gourmet kitchen with its marble counters, the library stacked with books I'd never had time to read, the master suite that opened onto a balcony overlooking the sea. Each step felt surreal, like walking through a dream I had built brick by brick, contract by contract, sleepless night by sleepless night. But dreams are complicated things. When I reached the balcony, I leaned against the railing and let the ocean air hit my face. The waves roared below, steady and endless. I thought about my father again. Did he even wonder where I'd gone after he told me to leave? Or was he sitting at the same table, drinking his scotch, telling Daniel how he'd finally taught me a lesson? I gripped the railing tighter. For years, I had craved their approval. I had bent myself in half, hidden my success, played the role of the failure so they could shine brighter. And in return, they had thrown me out. Now here I was, standing in a villa worth more than every asset they owned combined. And yet, instead of joy, I felt an ache in my chest. Because money could buy marble floors and ocean views, but it couldn't erase the scars of being unloved. I poured myself a glass of wine from the cellar and walked barefoot across the cool stone floors. The house was beautiful, but it was also empty. No laughter echoed through the halls. No one was here to share the moment with me. And that's when the realization struck me. This villa wasn't just a home. It was a turning point. It wasn't about proving my worth to them anymore. It was about proving it to myself. I had survived their rejection, their silence, their cruelty, and I had come out stronger, wealthier, freer. This place wasn't built on their approval. It was built on the very foundation of their doubt. I sat down on the edge of the infinity pool, letting the water lap against my feet. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but all I could see was the reflection of a woman who had refused to stay broken. For the first time, I whispered the words out loud, tasting their truth. I am enough. The villa seemed to breathe with me, its walls soaking in the declaration. That night, as I lay in the master suite listening to the ocean, I realized something else. This was just the beginning. The villa wasn't the end of my story. It was the weapon, the fortress, the stage on which the real transformation would unfold. Because sooner or later, my family would find out. And when they did, I wouldn't be the failure at their table anymore. I would be the one they couldn't ignore. And that day, the silence would finally break. It had been 3 weeks since I moved into the villa. 3 weeks of waking up to the sound of crashing waves instead of my father's voice in my head. 3 weeks of bored meetings over video calls, dinners by the pool, and long evenings where silence finally felt like peace instead of punishment. For the first time in years, I had started to breathe. But peace never lasts. Not when you have a past like mine. The knock came on a Friday morning. Sharp. Urgent. I was in the middle of reviewing a contract when the sound echoed through the villa's glass halls. At first, I thought it was Claire. She usually arrived around 10. But when I opened the door, my breath caught. Standing there, framed by the Florida sunlight, was my mother. Helen, I whispered before I could stop myself. Her eyes darted past me into the villa, wide and disbelieving. She was dressed in her usual conservative style, pearls at her neck, cardigan neatly buttoned, but her face carried something I had never seen before. Not disdain, not disappointment, something closer to desperation. "Emily," she said, her voice trembling, "you live here?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. I had imagined this confrontation 1,000 times, the day my family discovered the truth. In those fantasies, I was always sharp, prepared, untouchable. But standing there in reality, I felt my walls crack. "Yes," I finally said, my voice steady. "This is my home." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as her eyes swept over the chandeliers, the art, the ocean view. I watched her mouth part slightly, as if she couldn't reconcile the daughter she had abandoned with the empire around her. "How?" she finally whispered. I crossed my arms. "You never asked what I was building, Mom. You never cared enough to listen." Her face crumpled, and for the first time in my life, I saw her look small. "Emily, your father doesn't know I'm here. He thinks you're—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. "He thinks you're gone." "Gone?" I laughed bitterly. "That's convenient. Makes it easier to erase me from the family pictures, doesn't it?" She flinched, and for once, I didn't feel guilty. "Why are you here?" I demanded. Her hands trembled as she clutched her purse. "Your father. Things haven't been easy. The business is failing. Daniel's been struggling at the hospital. Her voice cracked. "We need help." And there it was. The reason she had come. Not for me. Not for the daughter they cast aside. But for what I could give them. I should have expected it. Still, the words landed like stones in my chest. "You came here because you need money," I said flatly. Her eyes filled with tears. "Emily, please. You have so much. And we're drowning." For a long moment, I stared at her. I thought about the nights I spent alone in that Chicago apartment, scraping together enough for rent. The times I covered their bills anonymously, too afraid to reveal the truth. The endless dinners where I was mocked, dismissed, erased. And now here she was, standing in my villa, asking for a lifeline. Something inside me hardened. "You know what's funny, Mom?" I said slowly. 4 years, I begged for a place at your table. I begged for your love, your approval, anything. And you gave me nothing. Now you come to my table, and suddenly I'm the one with the power. Her tears spilled over. "Emily, please. He didn't mean it that night. Your father." "Stop." My voice cut like a blade. "He meant every word. And so did you, every time you stayed silent. You all made your choice." She covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. And for a flicker of a second, I felt that old ache, the part of me that still longed for her to choose me. But then I remembered the way she looked away at the dinner table, how she let Dad's words hang in the air without defending me. I stepped closer, my voice low. "You'll leave now. Tell Dad he was right. I don't belong in his house. But this—" I gestured to the glass walls, the ocean, the empire around me. "This is mine, and he doesn't belong here." She stayed at me, broken, before turning toward the door. Her steps echoed, each one heavier than the last. When the door shut behind her, I sank into one of the velvet chairs, my chest heaving. For years, I had imagined revenge as some grand, explosive moment. But now I realized it wasn't about shouting or spectacle. It was about silence, about making them live with the knowledge of what they threw away. That night, I sat on the balcony, wine glass in hand, watching the waves crash. Somewhere in Chicago, my father probably still thought I was a disgrace. Let him. The truth had already started to unravel, and when it reached him, it would cut deeper than any words I could ever say. The past had come knocking, and this time, I wasn't the one left outside the door. The day I had both dreaded and dreamed of came sooner than I expected. 2 months after my mother showed up at my Florida villa, I received a letter in the mail. Not a typed envelope, not something corporate, but handwritten, shaky, in the familiar slant I'd once memoized on permission slips and birthday cards. It was from him. Emily, if there's any part of you that can hear me, I want to see you. Not as an investor, not as a stranger, but as my daughter. Please, one dinner, one chance. Dad. For a long time, I just stared at the letter, my fingers tightening around the edges. Memories flooded back, his voice thundering, "Get out!" echoing in my ears, the humiliation of packing my life into 2 suitcases, the endless nights wondering if he even thought about me. Now, after everything, he wanted dinner. I almost tore the letter in half. But something inside me whispered that this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about me. About proving that I could stand in front of the people who had broken me, and not bend this time. So I wrote back. Dinner. One chance. But on my terms. Florida. My villa. Next Friday, 7 p.m. That Friday, I transformed the villa into something out of a dream. The chandeliers glowed like liquid fire. The long oak dining table was set with crystal glasses and silver cutlery, and the scent of rosemary roasted lamb drifted through the air. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted them to see the life they told me I'd never have. At exactly 7 p.m., I heard the knock. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to move slowly, deliberately, as I opened the door. There he was, my father, Douglas Hartman. The man who had built his entire life on reputation, authority, and control. His once dark hair was now streaked with white, his shoulders slightly stooped. And beside him was my mother, Helen, clutching her purse like it might protect her. "Emily," he said. Not cold, not commanding. Just quiet. "Come in," I answered, my voice even. They stepped inside, their eyes roaming over the marble floors, the panoramic ocean view, the art pieces carefully chosen from Paris and New York. My mother whispered something under her breath, a prayer, maybe, or disbelief. We sat at the table. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "This villa, this company, everything you've done. I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," I cut in, my eyes locked on his. He flinched, the truth landing harder than any insult could. "Maybe," he admitted, "maybe I was afraid. Afraid that you would succeed without the path I carved for you. That it would prove me wrong." For a moment, his voice cracked, and I saw not the tyrant who threw me out, but an old man drowning in regret. "I told you to get out that night," he said slowly, "and I thought I was protecting the family name. But all I did was destroy mine." The words should have felt like victory, but instead, they sank into me with a strange heaviness, because no apology, no admission, could ever erase the scars of being unwanted. I leaned forward, my voice calm but sharp as glass. "Do you know what Get Out did to me, Dad? It forced me to build a life where I didn't need you. It made me stronger, yes, but it also made me bleed alone. And while I was building empires, you were convincing yourself I was nothing." He lowered his eyes, unable to meet mine. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "We were wrong, Emily. All of us. And if there's any chance you'll let us back into your life." I held up my hand, silencing her. "This isn't about chances," I said firmly. "This isn't about forgiveness you think you deserve. This is about me deciding what's best for my life. And I won't let you drain it again." Tears slipped down her cheeks. My father's jaw tightened, but his eyes glistened too. For the first time, the powerful Douglas Hartman looked small. I stood, pushing my chair back. "Dinner's served. But understand this. You're not here because I needed you. You're here because I finally realized I don't." The words hung in the air like thunder. We ate in silence after that. Every bite felt like a declaration that I could feed them in my home at my table, under my roof, and still remain untouchable. When dessert was finished, my father finally whispered, "Emily, I'm proud of you." I let the words hang there. I didn't reach for them. I didn't let them pierce me with the longing I once had. Instead, I smiled faintly. "Good," I said, "because I'm proud of me too. And that's all that matters." When they left, I didn't walk them to the door. I didn't hug them goodbye. I simply watched from the balcony as they disappeared into the Florida night. For the first time, I didn't feel like the girl desperate for their approval. I felt like the woman who had built her own kingdom. That night, I hosted my usual Sunday dinner. Caleb sat beside me, Rachel cracked jokes across the table, and a group of young founders from the foundation laughed under the glow of string lights. This was my family now. The one I chose. The one that chose me back. No conditions. No shame. No get out. As the laughter rose around me, I raised my glass. "To the life we create," I said softly. And deep inside, I knew I had finally won. Not because they apologized. Not because they saw me. But because I no longer needed them to.